Good afternoon and welcome everybody to Meet the Funder. And here is our guest, Sandro. Hey, Sandro, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good to see you. And welcome everybody. So my name is Kevin Duggan. I'm the Director of Development with Games for Change. And these Meet the Funder sessions have been great this year. It's something we started a couple of years ago, and it's a wonderful opportunity for folks who are attending the festival to hear directly from people who are helping to support the work that we do in the games community and immersive media. And it's been really interesting this year. I think it's really spans the not-for-profit and for-profit worlds, and I think this year it's been interesting. We've really had a lot of presenters from government agencies who've talked about the funding opportunities there. We've also had venture capital folks who've really talked about the process and how that whole world works. And I think now with Sandro, I think it's interesting to think a little bit about sort of a slightly different model, this accelerator model, and the kind of opportunities that's created there. Before we dive in, just will tell people that so Sandro has posted his email address at the top of the chat queue, and so if for some reason we don't get to your question, or if you want to reach out to him afterwards, you can do so. Sandro doesn't have a presentation. He's gonna talk for a little bit, and then we're gonna have a conversation and invite folks again to post your questions. I would say wait till after he's spoken a bit, and then again we'll try and we'll get as much in as we can. And again, these sessions are about half hour long, so they're short. So try and keep your questions brief and relevant to the entire community as much as possible. And I guess on that note, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sandro Olivieri. Hope I said that right. And you are the entrepreneur in residence, which has to be one of the great all-time titles. Entrepreneur in residence for the AT&T Aspire Accelerator. And it says you designed and implemented the program to be as impactful as possible for young EdTech companies. And you also consult with other companies on impact acceleration programs, including ISTE, a great organization, Entangled Solutions, and others. And so that's it. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sandro. I'm going to disappear while you talk, but I'll come right back when you're ready.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin, and hi to this ether out there. It says 13 people are watching. That's great. Hi to all of you. I am going to keep my own comments brief, and we'll get right into questions. If you want to pop them in the chat in the meantime, that's fine with me. I'm only going to speak for 5 minutes or so. So, as Kevin mentioned, I'm the entrepreneur in residence for the Aspire Accelerator. It is a title that is entirely too fancy pants for me, but it's true that I did design, implement, and now operate this program for AT&T, who is my client. So I work with AT&T and other organizations like ISTE, Entangled. I've worked with Panasonic in the past on specifically designing programs that are impactful in whatever impact space that they're looking to work in. Our niche over the last few years has been in education technology. And so I've focused mostly there. And so with AT&T Aspire Accelerator in particular, we have had the opportunity, the privilege, I would say, to work with a whole bunch of game-based solutions to education technology. Just to back it up a little bit, the AT&T Aspire Accelerator is born out of the AT&T Foundation, who has been giving philanthropically in education for years. And it was much more of a traditional philanthropic process where there was grants being made to local organizations, direct service organizations, etc. But a few years ago, under the leadership of their director of social innovation, they decided that they could do more. They had a thesis that if they took their checks and paired it with additional resources, mentorship, etc., that they could multiply the impact that they had with their philanthropic dollar. And it turns out they were right. I designed this program for them where the check size is about $100,000 for usually pre-seed or seed stage companies in education technology that have already proven out some impact. They have some measure that what they're doing actually works. And the thesis is we can give you this $100,000 and access to an entrepreneur in residence, a network of mentors, some UX and UI design resources, and access to AT&T's broader platform to accelerate that impact that you've already proven out. And it's proven true. We've now helped 45 different organizations through the accelerator um, in all sorts of aspect. Usually, for 99% of them really are in the K through 12 age range. A broad majority are working with schools, although we've taken a lot that work directly with consumers. And so it's quite a varied set of kids that our interventions work with. But the one thing that sort of ties them all together, I think, is that they are impact forward. They're impact first. How can my technology bring about better learning outcomes for all students? A sort of secondary, but just as important goal for the AT&T Aspire Accelerator is that we aim to support diversity in all ways. So we understand that entrepreneurs, so let's put it this way, everybody has lived experience in education and some sort of education system. And so entrepreneurs in education technology tend to be anywhere and everywhere. And so we want diversity of geography. We also want diversity of the founders themselves and their backgrounds. So we have to date across our 45 portfolio companies invested 51% of all of our founders are founders of color. And at this point, just about 70% are female founders. So we're those numbers. It's been way too challenging to build the pipeline appropriately to get those numbers to happen. And that's something that I am personally passionate about, is building the pipeline of entrepreneurs of color out in industry in general, as well as female entrepreneurs, because their voices are traditionally underrepresented in technology. There's a lot more I could say, but I guess I would rather take questions and hear what you want to know about.
Great, thank you, Sandra. It sounds like a fantastic program, really. Why don't I start with a couple of questions? Just point of clarification, because again, we've been hearing from the venture folks. Yeah. The money that you put into these projects, you're not buying an equity stake, and there's no expectation of return on investment. It's basically a philanthropic. The money is philanthropic, or what do you expect from the relationship?
Sure. So it is actually a program that is open to both for and nonprofit organizations. Right. The investment for the for-profit organizations is in exchange for equity. Although because the money is out of the foundation, the whole reason for it is just a little bit of skin in the game kind of exchange, right? We want to be here with you to provide acceleration. We want you to be here with us to get the most out of this program as possible. And we do not track return on investment, but when it happens, that money goes back into the foundation so we can do additional giving and education projects. So while it is equity exchange for the for-profits, all return is meant for additional philanthropic giving. For the nonprofits, it's just a straight grant of $100,000. And everybody also, I'm not sure how this changes given the pandemic. The program itself has always been virtual, so that shift has been easy, but we've always given an additional stipend of $25,000 to help defray the cost of traveling for our virtual program. We get together 4 times during the 6-month program. And we gave it again this year. We just kicked off a cohort in May. but I'm not sure how that changes going forward if this stays
So you
on track like that.
you don't literally gather folks in a physical space. They're all working
We
in
do four
their
times a year.
perspectives,
Yeah,
but
we
you
do four
bring.
times a year. Yeah. One of the key aspects of the program, I think, um, is that it is 100% customized. One of the things we found out in our design process of the program was uh, because our founders can come from anywhere, have all sorts of different backgrounds. We can't assume that anyone, you know, so let's say this, if I wanted to do a lean startup methodologies 101 bootcamp, there's a really good chance 3 out of the 8 of my entrepreneurs are just sick and tired of hearing about lean startup, and I don't want to waste their time. So what we do instead is we do a white glove sort of customized approach with each of our founders. And so I meet with them weekly, essentially, to at first to get to know them and their business and their challenges and opportunities. And pretty quickly, we start getting to the point where I can start suggesting opportunities that they might not see, or start getting hurdles out of the way that they might not be ready for, or connect them to a mentor or an AT&T resource that might help in that situation. And what's true about startup life is that it's so fast that no matter where you start at the beginning of the 6 months, you might have a goal for what you want to get done for at the end of the 6 months, but it has changed 100% of the time with our founders what they're working on from the beginning to the end. So staying flexible and staying customized throughout the program has really helped us accelerate the development of these organizations.
So I guess related to that, there seems to be from a venture standpoint, particularly depending on what phase people invest in, whether the focus is really on a product or on a team and on the company, on the capacity of a company or
Yeah.
organization versus a specific product that they may have. And it sounds like for you guys, it's really more on the latter end, more like the team, the potential versus a specific product or service that maybe they would bring to market, because you've seen that shift over time.
Yeah, it's sort of an inexact science, but I would say that we lean heavily on trusting the person and the team. Um, there will be we have this great idea, and we think the potential for impact is huge, and we have these little bits of proof that it can be very impactful. And what we're looking for is, okay, that's a great idea, but who came up with that idea? And do we believe in their ability to have impact to the communities that they're looking to impact? And and if that's true, then we'll follow them wherever they go. If they decide that this idea was not right and they need to pivot, that's okay, and we'll help them do it. We are looking for that sort of that special thing that those founders have that are impact first, and then we help them sort of lean into that impact and develop business models that will allow them to have that impact for several more years to come, rather than create an unsustainable fundraising situation for the nonprofits, for example, or not find a good enough revenue opportunity for the for-profit to sustain their operations and get to scale.
So we've both been using the word impact, and um, a number of our questions already are really around that. I mean, maybe we could drill down on that a little bit. So Dale asks, what are the impact metrics? Another, Christia says, of companies you funded, what are tangible examples of proven impact? And so what are you? So are we talking about the financial? Are the metrics financial? Are they social
No,
benefits?
never.
And how do you? And I know, like in impact investing, it's a question. It's like, particularly when you're dealing with investors, and you're saying, well, maybe you get a lesser return because there's a social benefit that we're generating.
Yeah.
How do you quantify that? Or maybe you don't.
I mean, let's open question in our industry.
Right.
If anyone tells you that they know how to measure impact, they're wrong. They don't know what they're doing just yet. Neither do we. We're hungry to figure out more, but we have to lean into the things that we have, the things that are available. In super early stages, nobody has the money to do a randomized control trial or do any sort of hard science to figure out and isolate the impact of their organization, and that's not what we're looking for. Often, let's say like one of our entrepreneurs is speaking at this conference, Vanessa Gill of Social Cipher. You know, early on, she's developed a game to help neurodivergent youth sort of practice social situations within gameplay. And on the face of it, it's a really cool idea. You know, folks on the autism spectrum are twice as likely to be gamers as others. They have difficulty finding ways in which to engage in ways in which to practice social interactions, which is what leads to better integration with their peers. And so the idea was good, and the impact that she could show was that the kids love the game. And there's no better impact metric for something like that than simply that. And then we're helping her show that that ties directly into um, direct achievement at school. And so we don't know what that looks like yet, right? But the impact is really so much about the story. For example, one of our other entrepreneurs, Lindsay Trope of Immersed Games, she built this platform called Taito Online. It's essentially an online gaming environment where you get to practice next generation science standards. So essentially science, you're doing science within a virtualized world. Um, and she was able to prove through a grant at NSF, you know, this is sort of like the opposites, right? Vanessa at Social Cipher was just had the stories. Lindsay has hard science through NSF that said this works to increase achievement of science attainment on these standards. Boom, 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 and I have percentages to prove it, and we've done it. And so it's a spectrum. I don't have the answer for how you measure impact and how. But I do think that if anyone's telling you they figured it out, I don't think that's true just yet. Look for funders that understand you and your story and your passion for what you're trying to do and want to help you prove it.
Are you comfortable, being the first money in sometimes?
We have been.
And do you find that your investment and when people graduate from the program, they're more able to secure another round of funding from other sources, whether maybe it's an NSF or another government agency or venture funding or something like that?
Yeah, we have been the first in a couple of times. I will say that when we designed the program, it was not the intention. But you find the right idea, the right entrepreneurs, and the risk reward calculation changes, right? And so we have been first money in. We're not afraid of that. That's okay with us. And what the metrics for our program have been spectacular. 45 companies across the past 6 years. An additional, I lose track of the number now, but I think it's an additional $34 million raised after AT&T had already put money in across the 6 years and 45 companies. And what is the other number? It was 42 million additional students reached after they'd gone through our program. So we're having success. We've had several Series A rounds happen in our portfolio, several acquisitions. We've only had 2 of our 45 go under over the last 6 years, which for any accelerator program is just phenomenal.
That's pretty amazing.
So we're very happy about that.
So let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. I'm sure there are people here who are going to be very interested in this program. So what's your cycle? What's your timeline? What's the process for making your decisions? And then once you're in the program, how long does it go for the folks?
So we just kicked off in May. We do 1 cohort per year. It's 8 companies, typically 5 for-profit, 3 nonprofit. It's I said 8 companies big. It runs for 6 months, typically from May to November. I'm not sure how that changes next year.
So it's each year you do a call.
Each year we do 1 cohort. And the call happens around January. The application period is from about early January to early February. We have applications open for about a month.
And could you talk a little bit about the decision-making process? Again, not so much the criteria. I think you've sort of covered that a lot, but who decides and how many steps does it go through, and how do you go back to candidates and ask for more information? And
Definitely. I mean, starting a relationship with me is an excellent first step. I review every single application that comes in. We get about 300 every year. So I go on my own lockdown once a year to read through 300 applications. Um, but I mean, it's fulfilling to see so many people working on impact programs in education. So I love to do it. And so ultimately, as you can imagine, because I don't work directly for AT&T, I cannot be the final decider, but what I do is recommend folks for first round interviews, recommend the second round interviews. I recommend finalists. Ultimately, AT&T makes the decision of who they're going to invest in, but they're doing a great
In
job.
is that foundation leadership, or is it the?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's the director of social investment and their partners at AT&T's corporate development. Yep.
And those folks are based where? New York or Dallas or?
All over the place. Yeah, AT&T is headquartered in Dallas, so a lot of the corporate development folks are there. The director of social innovation is in the San Francisco Bay Area, but she has team members in Seattle, in California, in Texas, and New York.
So first step for folks would be to email you, and the anticipation will be that early next year is when you would begin considering the next. That's when the next cycle would start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I knew Vanessa and Lindsay, the two entrepreneurs that I mentioned, are in this year's cohort. I had known them for about a year before they applied, and I'm glad that they did. So I see a question there about where Aspire is based. So Aspire is based nowhere. It's been designed as a virtual accelerator from day one. Vanessa's in LA, Lindsay's in Buffalo, New York. We have an entrepreneur right now from Milwaukee. We have had Denver, Dallas, Seattle, Savannah, Georgia, everywhere. And that's the way we like it.
So Dale asked a question which I don't know that I really understand this, but maybe you will. What opportunities are you seeing right now in EdTech as it relates to data science and machine learning? Any potential blind spots you're aware of that education is missing as it relates to leveraging data?
Yeah, I think I appreciate the question, and I think that one of the things that we're fond of saying is that in the world of education technology, we are still in the replacing textbooks and moving furniture stage of EdTech. It is so early. Those of us that have been in it for a long time recognize the massive potential for technology to be a key part of education outcomes for all kids. But we're not there yet. I mean, it's such an old system that we really need to push on in so many ways. So in terms of opportunities that I'm seeing right now, they are few but increasing. What is increasing in particular is a group of folks, or sort of the field of what is now called learning engineering. And Dale, send me an email and I'll get you hooked up to this group, this learning engineering group that's full of both funders, researchers, data scientists, developers on what are sort of the hard science ways to get at learning and how do we ensure that everybody is delivering learning outcomes. I think that, like I said, those of us that have been in it for a while understand that when we talk about things like personalized learning and adaptive pathways to learning and equitable outcomes for all kids, especially if they're in communities of poverty, communities of color, often underserved districts, technology can play a key role in getting rid of all of the bias, all of the access issues that we have in today's education system. And so learning engineering is trying to tackle that from a systemic way. Reach out.
So, at the beginning of this, you mentioned that you tend to focus on folks that are working in schools or with districts. What about out of school, and what about after school? And I think in particular, as we're looking at, post-COVID or, whatever, during the pandemic, so much has migrated to this, remote learning or online learning, and maybe the possibility of, in the future of this, or more kind of hybrid learning spaces that are not in school related to school, out of school, whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe talk a little bit about that and whether you expect to see something different and for the next cohort that's going to arise out of this particular moment, and also how you think about learning outside of a traditional school environment.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that, so we have worked with, like I said, a variety of folks, right? A lot of them work directly with schools, but a lot also work directly with consumers, and after school programs, sort of extracurricular support programs. I'm thinking about special education as well. So immersed games, for example, at Title Online, I mentioned, they started off distributing through Steam directly to consumers and now have shifted to sort of serve schools, but I don't think they're going to abandon consumers entirely. We've had lots of others who go directly to consumers, and many that are having to in this time of school closure, to continue to have as much impact as possible on kids. But we do everything from early childhood, so they're selling to Head Start programs, or to parents of early learners at home. We've done one sort of higher ed investment. I'm not sure we're going to do that again. So make the resources and mentorship available across such a wide span of age ranges. The challenges are so much different that I don't think we're going to stretch in that way again. But yeah, we certainly do. And in terms of changes going into next year, hard to know where we're all going to be
That's for
when
sure.
next May comes around. But I do think that if anything happens, we'll lean into our thesis of continuing to support founders of color, female entrepreneurs, education technology that has impact. Because one of the things that we have found is that diversity coupled with technology-based interventions that lead to equitable outcomes are exactly what we need in times of school closure, pandemic, and calls for social and racial justice. It's just exactly what we need at this time, and if we do anything, it'll be to lean into that thesis.
I see that. So Christia has also asked, what equity percentage is required for a startup to become part of the accelerator? So I guess that's what your 100K, I guess that's what amount of equity does that typically buy?
Yeah, there's no hard and fast science. Well, it is a hard and fast science, but we're not looking for a requirement. What we're looking to do is round of financing you have open, or if you don't, maybe let us into a previous round that's already been closed but well defined. AT&T is not looking to dictate terms, really. They don't require a board seat. So what happens is, because it's largely dictated by your valuation and the maturity of your company at that time, for very early stage companies is up to 5% at most. Typically it's below 5%. This year we probably have some in the 1.5% range, for example.
All right, so Frank asks the question. We have 2 minutes left, and of course this is a question that we could probably talk about for a really long time. So he's asking about diversity. So do you see diversity as serving diverse audiences? So again, sort of the impact. Is it we're making sure that the beneficiaries are diverse, or is it diversity as an intrinsic driver of novel solutions? So I guess is diversity more, is it integral in some way? So it's a 2 minutes.
I mean, yeah, 2 minutes. It's an easy answer, obviously, and you're right, Frank. It's not an either or situation. It's both. I would say when I talk about it, I mean the latter, an intrinsic driver of novel solutions. Everybody on this chat, on this session, has a different background. I have Italian heritage, but my family is all from Chile since the late 1800s. I was born in Mexico. I immigrated to this country when I was 6. I was an ELL learner. Learned English. All of these things that make up individuals, whether they're immigrants or native born here, just make everybody different, and nobody can understand really truly my full experience, but they can understand some aspects of it. There's a really good chance that immigrant founders, for example, will make something that speaks to me more directly than, say, somebody whose family has been in this country for generations. And what we've seen typically, both are valuable, but what we've seen typically from a funding standpoint is that typically white, typically male founders are the ones that receive most of the investment. Because education is such a special industry in that it serves all students, all kids in our country, I want to make sure that our industry stays special. That doesn't work exactly like a market or a typical technology market where most of our funding dollars will go to typically white, typically male entrepreneurs. And it's not to say that we haven't funded white male entrepreneurs in the past. Again, we're looking for diversity. So we're leaning into entrepreneurs of color and female entrepreneurs, but we're not leaving anybody out of the picture either.
Right. Well, that was an incredibly eloquent response in a really short time. So thank you for that. And I guess we should leave it there. And again, I want to thank you so much, Sandro, for making the time for this. Super helpful.
Yeah.
Really great. It's a great program, and I'm sure you're going to be hearing from a lot of our folks here. And again, your email address is pinned to the top of this chat. And again, and everyone in the room, please come back we have one more or two more Meet the Funder sessions today. And I hope to see you later. Right. Thanks again, Sandro.